I'll tell you a story. A priest who's down in the southern tier from this diocese told me a few years ago. He was pastor of probably one of the largest parishes down in that region, Binghamton area. And at one point, about 10 years ago, he was notified that his parochial vicar, his assisting priest, because he was the pastor, had assistant priest, was being reassigned. He was given his own parish, and because of just the need. There was an opening and there was a need because of retirements, of sickness. And so this made a necessity for changes within this parish. So from going from 2 priests down to one of the things he needed to do was to cut daily Mass. They had 2 daily Masses a day. They had one at 6:30 and 9 o'clock. So he decided that, well, we're going to have to cut down to 1 because it's not good for me to do 2. So, one was at 6:30, one was at 9 o'clock. So they cut it down to 1. They put it at 7:45 to split the difference, and that's what they had. Now, many people were, they knew about this. They kind of were understanding, like, we're in changing times. This kind of is bound to happen. This is the first time in this parish's history for 70 or 80 years that they have only 1 priest. They've had multiple priests for a long time. Most people were understanding, but there was one daily Mass parishioner, very good guy, very good devout Catholic, who went to the 9 o'clock Mass almost every day. He was a little upset. And so he talked to the pastor, and he comes up to him and he says, I'm very upset because us retired people, we enjoy this 9 o'clock Mass. We have a great community here, and now you've taken it away from us. We're really upset about this. So the pastor, he says, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry, but I can't do, it's not good for me to do 2 daily Masses because spiritually it's not good. And then what happens if I have a funeral? Then I'd have to do 3 Masses, and that's against canon law. During the week, we can't say more than 3 Masses. And that really didn't really satisfy him. So the pastor kind of asked the man a question. He's like, I know you got 3 adult children, 3 sons. Did you ever ask or encourage any of them to be priests? The man was kind of caught off guard. He's like, well, no, I didn't. Well, I know you also have a number of grandsons too. Have you encouraged any of them right now to be priests? He's like, well, no, I haven't. And I think at that point, the guy got the point. And the point of that priest's story, the point of the priest asking that question, wasn't to assign blame. He wasn't focused on where to put the blame. No. It is easy to put blame in those situations on different people. But more, his point was trying to create introspection, reflection. Why are we here? It's not the priest's fault. There's a lot more going on. That is where the state of the church is. And so my purpose for this homily is to talk essentially about the state of the church. This is like a little state of the union. But we're going to talk about not just our parishes, but the church in general, the church throughout the country, our diocese, and throughout the world. And we know that things have changed drastically. The church is not the same as it was 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 5 years ago. The church has changed drastically in the last 5 years. So it's necessary for us to examine our situation and to see what we need to do. Where is the Holy Spirit calling us? Last week I mentioned that we're having a town hall meeting this Thursday. I mentioned it at the end of Mass, and that's kind of like pulling the pin on a hand grenade and throwing it and getting out of here. One of my dad's references. But I knew, but I didn't do it without explaining why we are doing this. And the great news is that overwhelmingly people are saying, yeah, no, Father, it's good that we're doing this. It's good that we are looking and taking a look at where we're going, because things have changed. We don't want to be left behind. We need to be proactive. But of course, maybe about 11:30 Mass, somebody had gone to one of the earlier Masses, and I caught them, in between, and they say, Father, there's some rumors going around about perhaps something is closing. One of the parishes, we're going to do this, that. And I said, I knew there was going to be rumors. This isn't my first rodeo. I knew what was going to happen to this. So, but I could assure them, let's look at the facts, but also let's look at this too. Is that I can assure you that we're not looking at closing. We're not looking at closing any churches. We're looking to maintain as much as we can. But the great news, the one thing that will help us go into the future is looking at the administrative side of our 4 parishes. Right now, we are 4 separate canonical entities. We're 4 separate parishes. Now, that's good. It makes sense. It's been like that for 100 or so years. But it makes administration difficult in a lot of different aspects, especially when none of these parishes were designed to have one pastor running 4 of them. So some things that could be solved if we were to say maybe have a canonical merger, which is merging the parish but keeping the 4 churches, 4 worship sites, is that we would cut down on overhead, administrative cost. I think I mentioned at one of the other parishes last week that we pay ADP, the payroll company, 4 times because we have 4 parishes. Now, if we were to be one parish, we would cut our payroll by 300%, our payroll costs. So that's one thing that we can do. The other thing that I look at is maybe also energy cost. In the winter, I was looking at the NIMO bill or the other energy bills. For like February and March, per month, we were spending between the 4 parishes just to heat and keep the lights on of all the buildings, about $5,000. That's not chump change. That's overhead. That's overhead. And so this is what this is geared towards, is how can we better preach the kingdom of God? Yes, buildings are important, but what's more important is the proclamation of the gospel. What's more important is the Eucharist. What more important is making disciples, making intentional disciples. And this isn't the first time. I'm not going into uncharted territory. Many places in the diocese have already done something similar to this. Just this past year, and I have it in the bulletin if you want to read about it, there is a parish out in Hamilton, New York, well actually Hamilton, Morrisville, Oriskany Falls, and Waterville. They just formed on July 1st Holy Spirit Parish. Now for maybe the last 10 years they were one parish under 4 parishes under 1 priest. Now they're 1 parish with 1 priest but 4 worship sites. Mass schedule didn't change when they did this new merger, but it helps the pastor to better administrate and to be a better administrator for those 4 parishes. Actually, it can help him form also a ministry team so that he has help to go out and to do that great ministerial work. Not the only place either. Endicott just did that. Last year, Rome had 4 churches that became 1 parish. So this isn't new territory. But as much as I try to reassure you, sometimes it can be very daunting. We may first want to say, oh, this is scary. We may want to fight it. Well, we want to try our best to listen and understand. Sometimes we're prone to being reactionary, but in these times when we're looking at the Holy Spirit pushing us in maybe a new direction, it's important that we recommit to listening and understanding. Now, we had a little mix-up with the first reading today, but I'm going to talk about the 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Book of Kings. And I encourage you to read it. It's a great reading. The Book of Kings, the Lord is talking to the prophet Elijah, and he's saying the Lord's going to be passing by. And the Lord passes by, and we hear he's not in the wind, he's not in the earthquake, he's not in the storms. But the Lord is found in a small whispering sound. And that is the truth about how God speaks to us, is that there's so much noise out there. We need to be intentional, and we need to essentially try and put effort into listening, because, especially to God, because His voice it will be drowned out by the noise of the world. Listening and understanding is something we have to work at. When I was in seminary, my first year, we studied philosophy. That's the basis for a theological education, which you need to get ordained a priest. And philosophy is not the easiest thing to grasp, so you need to train yourself to read it if you're not, if it's not your first, if you're not your penchant. So we had a great professor that taught us philosophy the first 2 years. His name was Dr. Paul Seaton. And essentially what he did in those, maybe the first few classes was, maybe the first semester was, he was teaching us how to read. Teaching us how to read again, not phonetically, but how to read to understand. He said that we're going to be reading a lot of texts. Philosophy is a lot of textual reading. We're going to be reading Aristotle. We're going to be reading Plato. We're going to be reading St. Augustine. We're going to be reading St. Thomas Aquinas. We need to be able to read so that we understand the whole of it. And he said the best way to read, the way he taught us to read any document, is as a whole with parts. As a whole with parts. And that's how we can, if we know how to do that, maybe not just from reading a document, but for understanding a situation, we're going to be miles ahead. Because if we understand the whole with parts, then we can make better decisions. Now the thing is, that's a lost art. That's a lost art in our society today, especially if you look at the media. Now I trashed cable news a couple weeks ago. I'm going to do it again. Because they are prone to this habit called editorialism. And that's not just cable news, but a lot of news outlets. Now what editorialism is it's writing a news article or writing something with an intention, with a preformed intention in mind. Just fitting a narrative, taking the facts and kind of massaging them to get your narrative. That's dangerous, and it's a bad habit. We don't want that. We want to be able to understand situations as a whole with parts. Not just in wider news media, but even in the Catholic sphere. Pope Francis has been kind of cornered as a liberal. People, if you think about Francis, like, oh yeah, he's liberal. If you actually read a lot of what Pope Francis said, you would say, no, he's not the liberal that people are making him out to be in the media. Same with Pope Benedict. Pope Benedict was not this arch-conservative that people were making him out to be in the media. There's a lot more to understand them. And they're both brilliant men. Both the corpus of work is incredible. But it's important that we, in this day and age, learn to listen and understand with intention. Now, as I said, we're going back to the situation at hand in the church. Yeah, there's a lot of changes that have happened, and so it's important that we be proactive so that we don't fall behind, but so that we can better minister, so that we're not wasting time on just piddly things. But I'll tell you this, I'm going to give you a little bit of hope, because we're not in the worst situation. We're not in the worst situation. If you look at other places in the church, in the country and in the world, it's not that bad. In 2005, I went to a wedding in the family. One of my cousins got married in Nashville, Tennessee. So the wedding was on Saturday, and so my family, we were going to go to Mass on Sunday. So our hotel was in the city of Nashville. We had to drive 30 minutes outside of the city to find a Catholic church. We don't have to drive that far here. Maybe it's, maybe 5 to 10 minutes on average. But in Nashville, Tennessee, an all-American city, major metropolitan city, we had to drive 30 minutes to get to a Catholic Mass. Now, given we would have driven an hour or over an hour, however long it would have taken to get to Sunday Mass. But still, the point remains, it's not as bad up here. Now, the thing about Tennessee is that it's about 3% Catholic, the whole entire state. So it makes sense. It's kind of stretched out. It's not that bad here. Another one I'll give you. My friend in seminary, Jeremy, his name is now Father Jeremy. He's a French priest. He's in he now ministers in Madagascar as a missionary. In seminary, he was assigned to on the weekends to help a priest, to kind of shadow a priest in the Diocese of Poitiers. Now, Poitiers is in eastern France. And one priest had multiple parish assignments, more than me. You want to wager a guess at how many parishes or churches this priest had? 22. 22 churches this priest was responsible for. Now, you can imagine they didn't have 22 masses on the weekend, that some of these parishes were basically chapels or oratories, that they could only see a priest once a year. Now, that'll never happen in our country, because one thing in France is that the French government owns all the church property. So the churches don't have to worry about maintenance costs. They are just covered by the French government. Now, if we get to that point, NIMO is a reality, or National Grid is a reality for us. But the truth of the matter is that we can give thanks that we don't have that much of a hardship. Now, when I talk about those things, it may even make you even more anxious, like, oh, this is where we're going. But I can assure you that I want to point you to Jesus in the gospel today, because the words that he says are words not only for the disciples, but they're words for you and me. Be not afraid. Be not afraid. Let's look at Peter. Peter's one of my favorite saints because he's just, he's so easily relatable. He's so human. He says, Jesus commanded I come to you on the water. And he does. And he's able to walk on water. He's able to do something he thought was out of his ability. But then he looks at the storms, and then he notices the strong wind. And that's when he begins to sink. That's with us, right? Sometimes we're doing well, and then we focus on those anxieties, we focus on the storms, we focus on those distresses, the things that might not even happen to us, and then we begin to sink. But if we keep our eyes focused on Jesus, if we keep our focus on Jesus, we're going to be able to do things like that we never thought possible, like walk on water. So that's what Jesus teaches us today, is that if we keep our focus on Him, it's going to be okay. Not going to be painless. Life is sometimes not painless. So it's not a guarantee it's not going to be painless, but He assures us that it's going to be okay. The truth of the church is that, we look to the early church, martyrs. The church was built on the blood of the martyrs. The hardship is always going to be there. But if we keep our focus on Jesus and on His will, things will be okay. And that's why I'm hopeful, because I see the fruit of it. Our churches are growing, where there's more people around us at Mass, you can see, that there's reason to be hopeful, because the Lord may be calling us to something even better. I'm going to say the Lord is calling us to something better than where we are now. It's just that if we keep Him in the driver's seat, it'll happen. If we, sometimes if we resist, we may kind of learn after a while, like, no, we'll be more fruitful if the Lord is in control. So, approaching this town hall at Thursday in this building, right in this very room, at 7 o'clock on Thursday. As your pastor, I just make a few requests. There's just a few things you could do for me, but also for the parish. The first is to come. Come to this meeting. Come to hear what is being said. I'm not running it. It's going to be done by Father Christopher Sipe, who is the Vice Chancellor of the diocese. He has a degree in canon law, and he has helped a lot of different parishes in helping them kind of envision the future. Like the one in Hamilton. They just came together and they were really helped a lot by what Father Sipe did. The one in Rome I mentioned, those 4 churches in Rome, the one down in Endicott, and very much other places. He helps us to understand what's happening, but also uses our strengths and uses what we have so that we can go forward and that we can essentially put Jesus at the center and proclaim the gospel. And I also want to make a special invitation to our young people out there, because not only are you the president of the church, but you are the future of the church. So I want you to be present, and I want you to be there so that you can see where, have your voice in there, but also because you are, it's your children that are going to be brought up. We're going to be teaching your children catechism. We're going to be giving your children the sacraments. We want you to have a say in this because you are the future of the church. The second, I just want to say that this is not an airing of grievances. It's not December 23rd. It's not Festivus. I'm not putting an aluminum pole up in this church. That's a Seinfeld reference. I say that because this is a chance for us to ask good questions, not to place blame on any one person, the bishop, anybody in the church, but it's really an opportunity for us to come and ask those pertinent questions. Like, what is this going to look like? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So I encourage you to come there with an open mind and ask those questions. And the third is the most important. It's to pray, to pray, and to pray. For our parishes, but also especially for vocations. Because that's what we're in dire need of. If you look at that first story that I told you, the trope, not my son, that can't exist anymore. We've got to be open to what God may be doing in one's life, in a young man's life. And the truth of the matter is that I see it. I see there's a lot of good young men in these parishes that would make great priests. And the new reality too for me is that I could easily say that, yeah, I'm a priest, I've done my part, I'm just going to go do the bishop's work. But now he's given me another responsibility, to be the vocation promotion director. And that's scary to me too, because now I've got that responsibility, but it's a great responsibility because it's just so great to see fruit come to fruition. But I'll also tell you this too, because it scares me, because we've ordained 1 priest this year. We ordained 2 next year. We potentially could ordain 3 the following year. We may have a gap in ordinations after that for 3 or 4 years. So that is what scares me. So that's why we need to pray for vocations more than ever. Pray for one from each of our churches, or more than one. If I, in my time as vocation director, if I have one guy from each church come into seminary, if we get 4 seminarians, that'll be like walking on water. That'll be more than I think we could ever do, but I think we can do it. Don't let me say I don't think we can do it, because I think it's possible. Because with God, all things are possible. If we keep our focus on Him, we are going to be able to walk on water. So especially that last thing I ask you to pray. Pray that more and more young men will hear that still small voice, that whisper of God, like Elijah. But also too, pray that more and more young men will keep their focus on the Lord so that they can drown out those storms and follow the Lord wholeheartedly.